my brush with a lot of ink because I want this to be fairly bold over here. But you can also see I'm doing it with a little more care than I did over here, because I really don't want to start putting in so much detail that I'm locking myself into a very specific scale pattern, because I want to save that for when I go in with my pen. That's just about where I want. Now, because of the nature of a reflective surface of water, there would be a reflection from that. And I can't worry that it's going to confuse this form under the water, because two different things are happening here. Now, these reflections have to follow the form of the top of the surface of the water, where these ripples are. So I'm going to go back in a little bit now and make sure that that's what they're moving with, that they're parallel to these ripples up here. And I've got some room for error here, because remember, I'm going back in with whiteout at the end to really pull this stuff out. But I think you can see how I'm altering that line now, so it's going with the surface of the water. And I don't want dry brush, because dry brush is not going to look wet enough. I want my brush wet. How's that? Does that work for your eye? Now, I've also got this form that would create a reflection, but I can't get too into the accuracy of reflections. All I need to do is make sure that these forms work for you, because if I start getting into this, I'm going to make a mess of this drawing. It's just going to get too confusing. What you might see in a photograph, if you were one of those people lucky enough to get a photo of this thing, is not what you want to worry about with the drawing. A drawing is, by its nature, an abstraction. So you just focus on the details that you feel are essential for the patterns you want to make clear for the eye. So I've got enough of a sense of the water there that I'm not going to do much more with the brush on the water, because I could really make a mess of things pretty quickly. But I am going to go in and do a little bit to at least connect these parts of the lake. And I want to lay in some textures that are specific to the surface of the lake to pull this drawing together. And I'm not going to do much in the back with a brush, because I want to save that for a pen. See how that kind of pulls things together with just a few strokes? Now, the other thing that would be happening by the side of a lake would be there would be a reflection of the larger rocks that are right up against the edge. So I want to, before I can monkey with the reflections, I want to make sure I get a little more detail on the rocks themselves. And I've been saving putting in these blacks so that I could kind of make sure that they meshed with the black areas on the creature. And now I'm going to go in, and these I'm going to work really loose. It's just enough to suggest the reflections. Because these reflections are important. If they're not there, the absence is going to bother you. But I don't need to put the kind of attention to them that I do with the reflections of the creature. Because again, the focus of this drawing is not the rocks, it's the creature. And that helps pull together the illusion of a lakeshore. Now, this is still pretty rough, because I'm just working with the brush at this stage. I'm still going to go in with my pen. But this is the point now where I've got to go in and solve some drawing problems. For instance, this serpent's body comes up, goes around this way, and then comes up here. And it goes from being a cylinder going in this direction to a cylinder going in this direction. I have to render that shift without flattening this out into a two-dimensional form. That makes sense? You understand what I'm talking about? So I've got to be careful with how I'm going to render that bend in the creature's neck. And part of it is I want to make sure that I set a pattern for myself that I can follow through all the way. So what I'm going to do my brush, catch the edge of the wet scales, be fairly consistent about where on the creature's body these wet scales are sitting. And this creates a reference point for you, the viewer. And now I can bend and mess with that reference point, and as long as I'm consistent in the patterns I'm laying down, your eye will do a lot of the hard work. How's that? So I'm trying to get this bend of the body and how it twists here by creating an optical illusion with these patterns. And I'll get a little bolder about the closer I get to the head and the neck. Work for you? Now, I can go in there with a lot more detail, but the more detail I put into this part of the drawing, two things. The more likely I'm going to screw those patterns up, and you're going to see it right off. And the more I'm going to distract from the real focal point of my drawing, which is this creature's face. So I want to not put much information here. I want to put more information here. And part of not putting more information here is your imagination will fill in the very detail and twist in the form that I could so easily screw up with one or two wrong brush strokes or pen strokes. So instead, I'm going to focus on the part of the drawing that I really want you looking at, and that is this adorable Lake from Men from Agog monster's face. I'm working on a book called The Vermont Monster Guide with my friend Joe Citro, and this is one of the drawings that I'm doing for that book. And curiously enough, Joe has turned up a number of sightings around Lake Men from Agog, which borders Vermont and Canada, which would seem to indicate more than one monster in the lake, because all the sightings seem to be such a different form. Now, for those people that don't believe in lake monsters, that kind of discrepancy suggests, see, there's really nothing there. But for someone like me, it suggests that A, there's more than one critter there over the years, highly unlikely in a body of water that's only the size of Lake Men from Agog. It is a sizable lake, but it's nowhere near the size of Lake Champlain, and none of the lakes in Vermont are anywhere near the size of, say, Lake Erie or Lake Michigan. Or it suggests to the naturalist in me, because I've been collecting amphibians and reptiles since I was a little kid, that maybe it's a creature that's gone through a metamorphic life cycle, and people have seen it at different stages of its life cycle. And that's the approach Joe and I are going to take with a few of the illustrations. And I'm actually going to do one yellow like those Herbert S. Zinn Golden Nature guides, where they would show the egg, and then the tadpole, and then the frog when it's still got the tail, and then the frog. And I'm going to propose a possible Men from Agog life cycle. Completely speculative, yes, but it'll be fun to draw.
Steve, do you draw them any differently if they're male or female?
Only way under the water over here, which I'm not going to do because this is family programming. So, actually, you know, I do. And it's a good question, because when I was doing my dinosaur comic Tyrant, the main character in the portion of the book that I completed, the first 4 issues, was a young female Tyrannosaurus Rex. And I did work out some approaches to how I was going to deal with trying to delineate between the genders. And one of the things I did was I had slimmer characteristics for the mother T-Rex, in part